security has been shifting left. And but it also means that if I'm on the response side, then I'm so far detached from things that creates the problem that sometimes it's hard to communicate back, and this lack of feedback loop creates more problem.
Yeah, I think that a lot of security organizations are stuck with the org structure of 10 years ago a little bit more than they should be. We don't have it's shocking to me sometimes, you find a lot of teams that have no resources or very few resources allocated against some of the biggest risk areas. I'll give you two or three off the top of my head. One is identity and access management. Look, like I could quote 100 different studies that say that 80% of all compromises these days are because of identity management issues. It's either, we saw, we've seen the Okta, cases and, Cloudflare story of what they had to deal with because of Okta and other companies as well. We've seen Microsoft with, the password spray attack compromise recently. You're like, wow, these are big, really, these are literally security companies that we're all counting on as core security infrastructure, and they're having identity and access management problems. If they're having them, then we need to be investing more in it. And yet on smaller security teams, you don't see a single dedicated identity and access person. A second example is the SaaS app environment. We have because SaaS apps are so fragmented, number one, the identity and access issues, but number two, access to data and abuse. We have so little visibility still as organizations. We have so little investment in having contextual awareness of what's happening inside some of the most important apps for our companies. And then a third area that I think of is supply chain risk, software supply chain. We're all relying on a ton of third-party software and open source software, and yet our third-party risk team in many companies has no engineers on it, has no technical people. It sits underneath governance, risk, and compliance, and is just a bunch of questionnaires. So those are three really important areas of security where by default we're not organized well, and because we lived in a different world a decade ago, and the orgs haven't evolved as quickly as the risks have.
Yeah, and then especially for small to mid-sized companies, they can't afford to put dedicated resources, like talent on even something as important as identity, right? Because maybe they have one or two folks, and those folks are always struggling with responding to things that have already happened, right? A breach happened, or there is a suspicious activity going and you need to remediate that. So they put all their energy in chasing that and forget that they need to turn on MFA on something important.